Peeps, gentrification ruins places that belong to us. Same peeps. What do you mean illegals? You aren't natives. It's not your land. This is another example of problems occurring not because of what X is, but because of how we define X. So to begin with, I'd like to define what gentrification is, and this is from Merriam-Webster. Then I'll go into discussion more onto the thought and how it's used in society. Gentrification, noun. Definition of gentrification: the process of repairing and rebuilding homes and businesses in a deteriorated area, such as an urban neighborhood, accompanied by an influx of middle class or affluent people that often results in the displacement of the earlier, usually poorer residents. Examples of use: a neighborhood undergoing gentrification. Another example: after a long period of decline, a recent wave of gentrification has sparked a commercial resurgence along the street. Another example: a free to rally, Take Back San Francisco, a day-long event protesting the gentrification of the city's lower rent districts. So that's it with the actual definition. Now, it is often used in the United States of America in a pejorative sense towards white people, predominantly white people, moving in to black neighborhoods in the United States of America. That's where I first heard it. And that's the general dynamic that it's used. But as you can see, there is no actual racial aspect in the definition. This happens in many other societies and many cultures. I have the experience of living here in Kenya, and I've lived in Europe, and there's different places. So one thing you'll see in Kenya is outright just slums. I'm talking corrugated metal homes with just top flight mansions, just wall to wall, literally wall to wall. There'll be a slum just 100 meters away from a place where there is these huge Italian villas built in these households. Like the back wall is literally touching that other, the area where the slum is. And when there's a slow spread, that is considered some form of gentrification. You have this place with power lines, paved roads, the water system works and all this stuff. And then just right across 100 meters away, people are living in dilapidated homes, tapping power lines. They don't have basic services. And slowly but surely, the continued spread happens. Sometimes when you have those more higher income, more affluent people building those bigger kind of organizations, neighborhoods, they bring the services to these other areas. This is something that is not really considered often when you talk about gentrification, but even here in the description, they talk about how it's something about repairing and rebuilding homes and businesses. That often happens as well. But before the people actually came to repair and rebuild those homes and in those neighborhoods, there were people living there. And I ask, what was happening? What was preventing those people from actually repairing and rebuilding those neighborhoods? I remember there was a time when I don't know, this was back in 2013 or it's something like that. I was in some bar here in Nairobi, and there was somebody there was some white lady, woman. I guess she must have been in the maybe 20s, late 20s, early 30s. But we were discussing something with politics, with moving around. She said something about living in San Francisco, and this is before I had the chance to live in San Francisco, but I had lived in the United States of America and experienced some of this. And then I just remember asking her, she was talking about something about moving place, and I was like, oh, you mean gentrification? And it got kind of awkward, because I think, in general, that is something that is normally used by white liberals and some people of color, communities of color, if you want to call them that. I don't know what people want to call themselves. Like the minorities in the United States of America. They say, this area has been gentrified, now you're kicking us out of our homes. And this is supposedly a negative thing that rich white yuppies want to do and things like this. So I think she seemed to be taken aback from actually me saying it in that environment, or maybe a word she was not expecting. But I want to apologize to this person, because at that point I don't really think I was meaning it in that sort of negative sense, like, oh, this is a negative thing. But then the thing could have actually changed and improved those neighborhoods. Part of the reasons and the limitations that those neighborhoods stay the way they are is mostly in part due to the different regulations and schemes and investment projects and organizations that the actual governing body does there, the state does there. It's not necessarily just people don't want to live there, because these places are close by. This is an experience that I had that didn't really sink into me when I was living in the Washington, D.C. area. I was thinking about how the United States government would be sending people, troops, over 6,000 miles away, almost 7,000 miles away. That's the distance between the United States and Iraq, to supposedly secure the peace. make the world safer for Americans and things like this. Then you just go just in Northeast DC, which is right on the doorstep there, just maybe 50 kilometers, not even 50 kilometers away from the White House. You have it right there, and that was occasionally the murder capital in the 90s of the country. So it's like, okay, you can secure the people over there, but you can't secure the people here. Now, if you go to Northeast DC and to certain areas in there, there has been a gentrification process. And sure, some of the historically black people that were living there have moved out or have been priced out. But at the same point, the level of crime has dropped. Now, there's various reasons for this, but gentrification in and of itself is not necessarily a negative thing. How it's done could be something that you talk about. But now, when you actually talk about it in the sense, when it's used in this insultive way, like, oh, you shouldn't come to this neighborhood because this area belongs to these other people. You are here wrongly. They're not saying you're here illegally, but you're here doing something negative by moving here. And in the moving actually involves some sort of improvement, making things more valuable in a sense that these people who are there can no longer afford to be in that area. There is something out there that most people will agree. Even if you think the cultural loss is negative, if you just look at the sort of neighborhood pre-gentrification versus post-gentrification, and you ask somebody, if you could live in these neighborhoods, pick one of these neighborhoods and be able to afford it with the money that you're making, which one would they choose? And most people would choose the post-gentrification neighborhood. So that is something where you're saying there is an actual improvement there from the actual moving, from the process, but people still hold it as something negative. But then when it comes to illegal immigration, they say you can't talk about illegal immigrants because you are not native to the United States of America. You came in here, so the only people I guess we can talk about, like people like the Cherokee Nation and the Native Americans, those might be the only people. If you're talking about somewhere in Australia, you can't be talking about people coming in. It's only the Aborigines and people like that. Is that what they want to say? But now, let me ask, should the Europeans be allowed to say, we don't like immigrants coming in here? Because they are as native as you can be to the European continent. So should they be allowed to say that about immigration? Let's bring it back to the United States of America to wind this up. So they'll say, you can't do that because you're not native. On the other hand, some of these very same people will say, these black people are native to this urban environment, so you coming in here is displacing them from the land that is theirs, that is traditionally theirs. And that tradition, you're establishing that ownership at the same time or even later than when white people supposedly established their ownership and nativity to the United States of America. So if they have a valid claim on those neighborhoods of being native there, then white people, Americans in general, have a greater claim to the United States of America and selecting who comes in, especially when they're coming in illegally. And in many cases, they're talking about specifically certain people who come to neighborhoods or come to areas illegally end up actually dropping the actual value of living in that neighborhood. And of course, there also is the displacement effect of the people coming in. So that's it for now. This is part of the Shorty series where I expand on short thoughts and hopefully engage you in conversation. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Like if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it. There's also links to our merchandise store. I try to update it regularly. There might be some line out of this that I might be able to put up. Some of these might be okay, just putting up just quotes and lines on the shirt. People might actually like those. I'll see about that. Till next time, goodbye.